Welcome to On the Rise podcast. I'm Matt Ricker, here today with Cathy McCabe, member of the class of 1985 and member of the Board of Trustees. Cathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure, I'm pleased that you're here. So first off, tell us a little bit about your education here in Iona. How would you categorize it, and what was your experience, and where did it lead you?
I was born and raised in New Rochelle, and Iona has been in my blood since I was little. My dad was the registrar for many years. He's also a graduate. My mom was a professor of theology here for almost 30 years and also has one of her masters. And I am the seventh of 7 kids to attend and graduate from Iona. So when I went to Ursuline right up the street, I did not apply to any other college. I knew I was going to be going to Iona University, college at the time and now university.
Tell me a little bit about your career in finance. I know that you were originally an English major, so how did you decide upon that career path and where did it take you?
When I was a sophomore, I actually thought I was going to be an international studies major. That just sounded really intriguing to me. I had this vision that I would be working in Europe. But when I was doing conversational Spanish, I was having a hard time grasping. Even though my professor thought I was doing a good job, I thought, you know what, I need to pivot and take a different route. And I met with my advisor, and we landed on English. And a lot of people thought, well, are you going to teach? Are you going to write? And those were not of interest to me at the time. And I said, so I was recruited on campus by a big 8 accounting firm. And their philosophy was, we're going to take this English major or liberal arts student who graduated with honors and who thinks broadly, and we're going to teach her or teach them, all those that were hired. And I went and I worked there and I learned a lot and I met some great people, but that wasn't the right fit for me because it was really more about numbers, and I'm way more about relationships. So I looked around and I landed at TIAA and ended up having a over 30-year career there, but I was on the client relationship side of the financial services organization, and it was always about working with our clients, and I think that's where I thrived. And my English major helped me learn that I can think more broadly. I can listen. I can be curious, and take all that I learn and apply it to the role.
In your experience, what are some common misconceptions people have about career advancement, and how can they overcome these misconceptions?
Yeah, there's lots of different things, and I'll just share a couple to not be overwhelming. But I think one is that people think hard work alone guarantees a promotion, and it is essential, but promotions also depend on visibility, networking, strategic skills. So it's really important that you advocate for yourself and build relationships, and take on high impact projects that give you visibility. Another is that job performance speaks for itself. You really have to understand that leaders have big, broad roles and might not know every single thing you're doing. It's really important that you regularly communicate your achievements. Make sure you're having performance reviews, meetings, and casual updates. Something I did throughout my career is every January I started a file. I just called it my accomplishments. And throughout the year, I would just move things in there as, I got a letter of recommendation or praise for doing a seminar. And when I would have my mid-year or check-ins with my manager, I would help them understand the different things that I was doing. And then I think just one other thing is networking. I think people think networking is just for extroverts. It's really critical. I spoke to someone in their 20s when I was doing some work on networking, and he said that he was a social introvert and a self-manufactured extrovert. but he made himself get out there and make connections. And it's those connections that over time have led to promotions and someone being highly thought of because he has put himself out there. So there's so many other things, but those are just a couple I would share.
So Cathy, tell me about the it factor. You've served in many leadership roles throughout your career with plenty of opportunities to lead teams of people. Have you noticed over time a particular it factor that you think helps people stand out in the workplace or get ahead in their careers?
You know, there really is something called the it factor. Over the years, what I've noticed about the most successful leaders are certain traits. One is executive presence, really always showing up with confidence. And that's something that you have to work on. It doesn't always come so easily. Having strong communication skills. You know, don't try to wing it. You know, practice in front of the mirror. If you're going to give a presentation, see what your facial expressions look like. Emotional intelligence, being able to read the room and adjust, navigate politics, manage relationships effectively. That's really critical. Ownership, owning things not only when it goes well, but when there's a challenge. Things are going to go wrong. We are human. We're going to make mistakes. It's what you learn from those mistakes that will really help. A couple of others is the workplace is always evolving. The only constant that there is change, and it's how you adapt to that, embrace change, learn from that. And I'll end it with work ethic and reliability. And I know that might sound basic, but being consistently dependable and delivering high quality work, going the extra mile, taking on projects, those are things that I've recognized throughout my career as people that stand out and move ahead.
So for those who are fortunate enough to work closely with you on a project, as I have on many occasions with the Gales Go Further program, we know you as someone who has a vision and can get things done. What advice do you have for those looking to be more adept and effective leaders? And by that, I mean both thinking with vision and motivating a team of people to collectively take ownership for pursuing that vision.
As a leader, you do have to have vision, you have to be strategic, and you have to help those that are a part of your team not only to follow you, you want them to want to follow you. And I think, when I think about advice for, being successful is just realizing that opportunities come in all different forms. So be open-minded, be curious. Things are not always simple. They're not always a linear path. Oftentimes you have to take a step back and really, I saw something recently about the acronym for the word FAIL. People don't like to fail. And, like I said, we are going to make mistakes throughout our career. It's how we react to that. And even when I go back and think about international studies and moving my major in my sophomore year, my first thought was, am I failing? Am I not trying hard enough? But when you think of the word fail as first attempt in learning, it really turns things around. So if you take that word and use that, that's the acronym. I think that's something people have to embrace, is that things aren't always going to go as smoothly as you want. And, unexpected challenges are going to come up. It's how you react to those challenges. And then, setting a clear vision for what you're going to do to adapt. I think at times it could come naturally. You'll just start flowing or going with the flow, and and then hopefully you're going to have people get on board with what it is that you're trying to do.
So what role does networking play in career advancement, and do you have any tips for effective networking?
I think no matter where you are in your career, if you're just starting out, if you're in the middle of your career or toward the end, networking is critical. And like I said, it's not just for extroverts. I know it's a little more painful if you're an introvert to get yourself out there and have that courage. I think one of the things that talking to many people about the benefits of networking is don't always go into it with them, what's in it for me. Think about what's in it for the other person. Connections you make today could be, a future successful opportunity. It's being okay if things, if you ask for something and the answer is no. If you don't ask, you don't know. And I think in the majority of cases when you do ask, especially in the networking and mentoring arena, people want to help. I think for me, that was probably one of the things that helped me be successful is not being afraid to ask for help. Not being afraid to ask to be introduced to somebody, for me to share my story, but also to learn theirs. What value can I bring to you? So I think if you think of it as a two-way street, it can be very, very effective.
So switching from networking, what role has mentorship played in your career development, and how have you sought out mentors throughout your journey?
I would say, mentoring played a critical role in my journey. And, I can remember I started at TIAA when I was 23. And part of my job early on was public speaking, was going out to the colleges and universities and other organizations that we work with to give presentations on the retirement plan being offered to them through their employer. And, I was very junior, so I had a mentor. And she came out with me probably for 6 months, so much so that she could mouth the words to my presentation in the back of the room. But that was really valuable. I had somebody who believed in me, who came and supported me and would give me feedback, both positive and constructive. And constructive feedback is really important, and it's what you take and apply for the next time. But throughout my career, first as someone that was not a manager, not a leader, but really helping me have executive presence and how I should show up to my clients. And then as I moved into ever-increasing leadership roles, the advice that I was given over time was so valued to me. They helped me make those transitions from being an individual contributor to a leader, giving me insight on how to interact with the executives, teaching me how to be strategic, how to set the vision, how to really get the team that I was leading to, like I said earlier, want to follow. And I have tips and advice that I received 10, 15, 20 years ago that are still vivid to me. And I have taken those same types of pieces of advice and have passed it on to others, hoping to help them be successful as well.
Now let's switch over to Gales Go Further. Can you believe that this year the program will be turning 5? This was started in 2020, so it's definitely come a long way. But can you take us back to a time when the program first launched, and what was the original vision for Gales Go Further? Where are we now, and where do you think we should be headed?
So I remember being, asked to be a part of this program as both a mentor and on the advisory board. And this was President Kerry's vision. And as soon as I learned what that vision was and what this was all about, I raised my hand so fast. Pick me. I would love to be a part of this. And I always say I would hope that if I were a student back a long time ago when I was a student here, I probably wouldn't have known what a mentor was, what it meant, but I would have hoped that I would have raised my hand and said, please let me be in this program. But knowing what it is now and how it benefited, or I benefited from being mentored, starting from, sports by my coaches and my mom, who was an unbelievable leader herself, and then all the different people throughout my career at TIAA and elsewhere, I wanted to make sure that I could give back. And I think the vision was, how do we get as many alumni to be a part of this, understand what this is, to help get as many who had unbelievable experiences themselves, who've walked in the shoes of the students and walked in the same hallways. The campus might look a little bit different, but the memories we all have are very similar. And, the vision was, having this program, an accredited program. Can you imagine? You earn a credit for being mentored by an alumni who's volunteering their time and want to give back, share their expertise, give you guidance, be a sounding board. When you think about it, it's first of all, it's an invaluable resource. It's also a gift. And, I don't remember the exact vision from day one, but I would say, working side by side with Jim Oates, who is so passionate about this program, his goal is, he'd like all alumni to be a part of it. And, there's about 55,000 of us, so that's a lofty goal, but I give him kudos for wanting to do that. But I think the real thing is, how many students can we impact to help them be the most prepared they can be when they're graduating from Iona, sort of leaving a safe space of all their friends and their clubs and sports and everything else, and helping them be prepared to, embark on their career, whatever that career might be. I think that's the vision. It's not just about advice. It's about the connections that are being made between alumni and students. And I just think that is so critical. I look at these students that have gone through the program. My first mentee is, he graduated. He's been in the workforce now for a couple of years. We're on LinkedIn together. We're on Instagram together. I'm watching him flourish. I'm seeing his promotions. That to me, it gives me so much gratification that, he and I got to connect and I got to be a part of that with him. So I think the program I think colleges and universities should be emulating this program because I just think it is an extremely, and I hope more and more students join the program. I know there are student ambassadors that are really trying to get the word out there. I don't want them to miss out on this unbelievable opportunity.
So as we wrap up, looking back, is there any advice you wish you had received earlier in your career that you would like to pass on to others aspiring for career success?
I do feel I was given some great advice throughout my career. I think one thing is always thinking about how you react to something. I'll never forget I was went for my first management role, and I thought it was a job I could do with my eyes closed, but it was my first management role, and I didn't get the role. And my boss at the time, when I asked, what could I have done differently, he said, no, the only thing that differentiated is you've never managed before. And I will be honest, I was crying on the inside, but I never let that show on the outside. I was extremely professional. I helped him understand that although I hadn't managed before, I had led projects. Let me tell you about the leadership skills that I have. Within a week or two, he was recommending me for another management role, which actually was probably the best thing that could have happened because it took me out of my comfort zone. It took me away from something I thought I could do with my eyes closed to learn something new and broaden my skills. And although I was upset at first, again, how I reacted to that led to something that really was the start of my trajectory. But I would say that folks have to remember that opportunities don't always come in the form you expect, and to stay open-minded. A lot of times you don't, everyone I think thinks that, I'm just going to climb that corporate ladder or whatever ladder it is that you're on, and whatever you're pursuing. But sometimes it's a lateral move. You have to step out of what you're doing to broaden your skills. That's not a bad thing. Now you've made your resume even bigger. There's going to be unexpected challenges. How do you react to those challenges? I think that's really critical. And always be open to learning. Just be curious, be open-minded, always be open to learning throughout your career. I will tell you, CEOs today have mentors and are always learning, and take the feedback and apply it, learn from it. I think those are some critical things.
All right. Well, let's end with some content recommendations. Are there any particular books, podcasts, or other content that you found helpful throughout your career and you would recommend to our listeners?
One of the things, I'm a voracious reader. I actually just donated about 40 business books to Iona University the night of our Gales Go Further. I thought at this point I could pass those on. I always sought out books or, podcasts that really focused on leadership. How could I be the best leader? What are the skills that are needed, to really have a vision, set strategy, get people to want to follow you? So I always tended toward, things that were, Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. It was always about how could I be the best leader, and then how can I pass those traits on to others? How can I develop that next, group of leaders that come behind me? And one of the things that I, kind of always pride myself on is that I didn't need to be the smartest in the room. I wanted to be surrounded by the smartest. I wanted diversity of thought. I didn't want people just to go along. I wanted them to push back so that we could really be doing the best work that we can. And in our case, working with clients, with educators, with those at colleges and universities that were working hard. How do we make sure that they get to retire with dignity? And so I always focused on, those types of books. Of course, I had to learn and make sure I understood what was going on in the financial world, what was going on in the markets, things that had an impact. So, of course, we were always doing those types of things, but I always was drawn more to leadership, mentoring, developing others along the way.
Yeah, I'll have to check those out. But Cathy, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope to have you back on in the future, and thank you for all that you do for Iona as well as the Gales Go Further program.
Well, thank you so much. And like I say, when I end anything that I'm a part of, is whoever's listening, make sure you're saving in your 401k. And do so from day one. And then, you'll be able to retire someday, too, with dignity.
For everyone listening, thank you for listening to On the Rise podcast. I'm Matt Ricker. I'll see you next time.